The way I do this is your retreat. And I'm so honored that I got asked to come here. It's a privilege to be able to do anything in Alcoholics Anonymous. I was supposed to be dead a long time ago, and I'm a lucky guy. I'm not a one-ship wonder. It took me 3 times to make this deal. My sobriety date is November 19th of 79. Only thing I can bring you is I've been here a long time. I know some things not to do. I know dating girls out of the treatment center doesn't work so well. But mostly what I want to talk about is maybe just a little bit about what I want to do. And we're kind of cramming into one day because tomorrow's Super Bowl. Yeah. So I don't know if anybody knows. This guy doesn't know. So usually I do 10, 11, and 12 on Sunday morning. So we're going to kind of condense it down. So the way I do it is I just go through what I did with the steps. But first I'll tell you a little bit about my story so you know that I didn't, parachute in here, that I belong here. I'm an alcoholic. I drank when I was drunk. My aunt never did that. My aunt never said, "I'm so drunk, could you please get me a drink?" Alcoholics drink when they're drunk. I say I drank when I'm drunk and nobody even flinched. It's like, of course. I never said, "Oh no, thanks. No, I'm good. I gotta go be at work in the morning. I'm driving." Something like that. I'm an alcoholic. I drank at the worst possible times. I drank when I was supposed to be doing something important. I drank when I was supposed to be doing something that I really worked hard to put together, like seeing my kids and stuff like that. And drank at the worst possible moments and swore I wasn't going to. Swore it and meant it. And yet I drank. And normal people don't understand that. They always want an explanation from us. Like, why would you drink? Why? Why don't you just have a beer? And they don't understand what this disease is all about. And so for me, the main thing I want to impart to you is, and we're going to do 1, 2, and 3 here. We're going to not beat up the whole hour because I want to leave some time at the end so we can, everybody can share, or the people who wanted to can share. But what I want to impart to you is how it's worked for me, because I don't know how it's going to work for you, and how it didn't work for me, because I've got some success stories. I've been with the same woman for 40 years. Yeah. And I know how it doesn't work. I was married and divorced and went back to high school as a divorcee. It took me 6 years to get through high school because I wound up paying child support for my senior year. So I know what does work and what doesn't work. I know the difference between the 2 skill sets in Alcoholics Anonymous. The one skill set is getting sober. And my dad was a really good example of that. I still get nervous when I talk, so here, let me play our national anthem. So let me just blast into it. I'm just going to spend about 8 minutes telling you how I got here. I was born in Compton, California. Wound up living in the desert outside of Las Vegas in the early 50s. My father was a World War II veteran, a blue-collar guy, truck driver, great guy. Sing like a bird, everybody loved him. He was Jekyll and Hyde. I can never remember which one is which, but we got the one that you weren't supposed to get at home. And he would, everybody loved him, and he'd come home and beat my mom and scare us kids. And I spent more than one night hiding in the desert. And he came to Alcoholics Anonymous. My mom met a person named Elsa Chamberlain, which if you're new around here, you don't know who that is, but it's Chuck Chamberlain's wife. Chuck Chamberlain is the guy that they made the tapes and the story, The New Pair of Glasses. And she met him in 1940. She met her in 1947, and tried to get my dad sober because my dad was just such a terrible drunk, and my dad couldn't get sober. My dad came to Alcoholics Anonymous from 1947 till 1975. And in 1975, while I was on my honeymoon for my 3rd wife at Caesar's Palace, I got the phone call that he had died across the street from the Salvation Army Yard in North Las Vegas, Nevada. Him and another drunk lived in a little 1-bedroom apartment, and they would fix furniture and stuff so they could get enough money for a bottle. And then they would go back to this little one-room apartment and drink till they passed out, and then get up next day and do it again. And he came to meetings regularly from 1947 till 1975. Never got more than 90 days sober. He's the guy on page Dos Equis. That's a great page. On page Dos Equis. And on page Dos Equis it says, because you hear this all the time, it says, in the old days, half the people who came here got sober. You've heard that? Well, that's not quite what it says. It says, of alcoholics, so the first thing is you got to be an alcoholic. And he was. Who came to AA, and he did, and really tried, and that's where he failed. So he didn't do all the steps. He didn't find a sponsor. He'd sit in the back of the room. He'd come home, make jokes about AA. Oh, Bob got drunk, and everybody's tore up. And just very clever. He was just so clever he never couldn't get this. He was so clever he couldn't surrender and sit down. He knew how to get sober. He didn't know how to stay sober. 50% got sober at once and remained that way. So I believe that's true. I think if an alcoholic comes here and comes in here and reads the book, does the steps, gets a sponsor, makes cookies instead of eating them, sets chairs out instead of just sitting in them, makes coffee instead of just drinking it, greets newcomers, tries to do the deal, I think half of them stay sober. I believe that. 25% sobered up after some relapses. That's me. And among the remainder, and this is the saddest part of Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm just going to cheer everybody up early in the morning. Of the remainder who stayed on with AA showed improvement. That sucks so bad. Oh my God. That was my dad. So my dad would come here and then he'd come back in and everybody would say, hey, we don't shoot our wounded, keep coming back, let us love you till you love yourself. The door swings both ways. And then he would put a little time together and then he'd think he overcorrected and then wind up drunk again. The other skill set, there's a point to where I'm getting at. You have to excuse me, I've had a Cuban coffee. The other skill set around here is staying sober. And staying sober is a whole different skill set. Because I sponsor guys that know how to get sober. And they call me up and say, hey man, I just got out. That's a good sign. And could you come pick me up? And okay, so where are you going to go? Well, I'm going to go to this house. But first we got to go to this other house and pick up my stuff. Right? They know how the system works. They know how to get sober. And they know when they drink, they know how the system works, and they know how to get back in the deal. And then after 90 days, they think they overcorrected, and they're back out again. And I still sponsor them. I sponsor everybody the same. I got guys that have called me for 40 years, every day. And I say, well, why do you call me for every day? They say, because it's been working for 40 years. I got the other guys that can know how to stay sober. When I came in here, I was a dice dealer. So growing up in Las Vegas out in the desert in a homestead, no power, no water, I was different from all the other kids in school because they had real houses. So I get to school and they all start pointing out that I'm poor. I was the poor kid. And I always tried to fit in, did anything I could to fit in. And it wasn't until I didn't take a drink till junior high because of my dad. I didn't want to be anything like him. Couldn't get home with a paycheck. I thought that was pathetic. I took a drink in junior high school. We moved to a tough part of Las Vegas, North Las Vegas. It's super tough. And everybody was tough but me. I was quick. I was the second fastest guy in my high school. I was the only guy that could beat me was a guy named Bucci Carter, and I made friends with Bucci. And everybody else, if I would fight you, that's the deal. I will fight you, but you got to catch me. So as soon as we squared off, I'm gone. And it was only the one guy that could catch me, so I made friends with him, and the rest could kiss my ass. And but I took a drink with these guys, and all of a sudden, something came over me. I took a drink with three guys that I was terrified of, and I drank 10 High whiskey, if anybody knows what that is. I like whiskey. And the first drink did nothing, the second drink did nothing. But the third drink, when I took that third drink, something happened that qualifies me to sit here with you guys today. And what happened was, just like that. That third drink got through my defenses, and just my shoulders dropped, and I exhaled, I think for the first time in a while. And we finished that bottle, and I'm looking at these three guys that I was terrified of earlier, and I'm thinking, these guys are lucky I'm here. I'm thinking, let's go do something. These are all of a sudden my best friends. Alcohol did that for me. I went back in the dance, and some girls terrified me. And I asked a girl to dance, and she said no, no big deal. I just asked another girl. That's how I wound up doing 6 years in high school. There was this enormous guy that he would thump me if he could catch me. So I always knew where he was in the room. And he was standing by the door giving me the mad dog look. And I looked at him, and I went, "What are you looking at?" Just like that. And he goes, "What?" I go, "You heard me. What are you looking at?" And I stumped him. He didn't know what to say. He just said nothing. Like he didn't have an answer. And I wasn't delusional. I didn't think I could beat him up, but I wasn't afraid. He could have beat me to death. It didn't matter. Alcohol did that for me. Alcohol did that for me. Alcohol is the most amazing drug on earth. Alcohol took me from being afraid of these guys to being their buddies. It took me from being afraid of girls to impregnating a couple of them. It just did all of that for me. And I'm convinced that if I had not found alcohol, I would have never made it through high school. I got friends that offed themselves. It was a tough neighborhood. But I don't think I would have made it through high school, feeling the way I did before I took that drink. Then I took that drink, and the whole world opened up. So, I'm getting back to these two traits, two talents in AA. I get out of high school, impregnated another girl, and got married again, got in trouble with the law, wound up going into the military to avoid a 1-year jail sentence during the Vietnam era. And when I got out of there, I came back to Vegas, became a dice dealer, a croupier, and got to work in the high-end casinos and made hundreds and hundreds of dollars a day. And I invested it all. This is a $300,000 note. But what it did is it got me to AA quick. I got here when I was 31. And it got me here because I had unlimited cash and I had a job you could do loaded. They did not care if you were loaded. That we were loaded, the players were loaded, the bosses were loaded, they didn't care. If you could deal a dice game, you had a job. So I come into AA the first time, and I made it 2 weeks. What I did was I came in for Christmas of 1978, and I had told my kids that I wasn't able to see my kids. I don't know if anybody else has got any issues like this, but I couldn't see my kids. And the reason was I would tell them I'm coming, and then I wouldn't show. So all the ex-wives got together and said, "That's it. You don't come for holidays. You don't come for Thanksgiving. You don't come for Christmas. You do not tell these kids you're going to be there and leave them looking at the glass, because you broke their hearts one too many times." So I was 86 from all the holidays. So I come into AA on December 11th of 78, and I called my ex-wives and told them all I've joined that A&A thing, and I want my kids for Christmas. So whoop-de-doo, I sold it. They bought it. And they would call me occasionally to check, and at first I'd say, "Oh, no problem, I'm going to that AA thing, Now we're getting closer to Christmas Eve. It's like, God, it's 2 weeks of sobriety. Just get off my back. I said I'd be sober. And Christmas Eve comes around. This is an important day. And I'm putting toys together, and I'm losing it. And the kids are going to be there tomorrow. And a friend of mine from the Army came by, and he says, "Let's have a drink." And it was Scotch whiskey, my drug of choice. And I just took a shot of Scotch whiskey to take off the edge. You know what happened. I don't remember Christmas. I don't know what I did, but 2 of those kids I didn't get to see for 8 years. I stayed drunk till May. And then I came back in. And this time I came in like the crazy newcomer. I came in saying, "You guys were right, man. The first drink gets you drunk. I'm in." And I had all the literature, and I had it underlined, and I'd leave it laying around, and I'd go to 3 meetings a day and drink coffee. And And I was just the crazy newcomer. And I got 6 months. I put 6 months together. What happened is I started to get the gifts of Alcoholics Anonymous. I got a job. And when I got a job, I had dropped a couple meetings. And then, I got a car and some other stuff. And pretty soon, I didn't have enough time for what got me all that stuff. All of a sudden, I'm going to one meeting a week. And it's Wednesday night. And I got sick one Wednesday night and didn't go. And 2 meetings that I missed later, I was picking up a drink. I took a half a glass of wine, chased it with a bottle of Chivas Regal, some going-away pills, took my brand new Lincoln and crashed it. It wasn't insured. I lost my job because they called in drunk. It was a real job. Called my wife, said, I'm coming home. She says, you're drunk. I'm changing the locks. I lost everything I owned in 12 hours. I carpet bombed my life. That's the first step. For me, what happened was, until something that devastated happened, because I'm standing next to a phone, it wasn't a booth, it was a thing on a wall. Until I was standing there at the 7-Eleven with some change, trying to figure out who would take my call. And knowing that I'm standing in my wardrobe. This is all I got. And I'm unemployed and broke. Until that happened to me, I couldn't get this deal. As long as I was getting away with it, as long as nothing too bad happened, I would come in here, get sober, then the gifts of Alcoholics Anonymous would take me back out. So I got a sponsor, once I found a place to live, I got a sponsor and I said, this time I'm all in. I am all in on AA. And not drinking became the most important thing in my life. It was then and it is today. I've been sober 15,600 and some days, and I've been to that many meetings. I go to a meeting every day. I do not screw with this. I don't screw with this. I got the second skill set. And it was funny because I had kind of a tenacious grip on staying sober. And I got this sponsor. He was a bartender, so he knew I couldn't pull anything over on this guy. Okay, he'd seen it all, being a bartender in Vegas. And so every time I try to run something on him, he'd just laugh and stuff. He says, you're going to drink again. And I just had that devastating. I said, no, I'm not going to drink again. He says, you have a problem. He said, you're just like your dad. And we had buried my dad. He says, you know how to get sober. You don't know how to stay sober. And he says, and I'm not trying to be mean. It's just how it is. And he says, your problem is, I love newcomers. I really like newcomers. I like the energy. I like the crazy stuff they say. I'm not an alcoholic. I'm just here to get on a list for a liver or something like that. I actually heard that in the meeting. I was doing one of these one time in California. These guys brought this guy up to me, and he had these lines on his face, these marks, like somebody clawed him. And they're laughing. And they say, here, meet this guy. I'll call him Bob. Hi, Bob. Great. What brings you here? He goes, well, I'm court ordered. I go, what do you got them lines for? He says, I got run over by a street sweeper. You don't get that at old-timer meetings. So anyway, I had a meeting that I'd go into. It was in the shallow end of the pool in Las Vegas in a place called the Triangle Club. And in Las Vegas, the shallow end of the pool on Saturday morning, cocktail waitresses, showgirls, 21 dealers, pit bosses, and Keno runners. I had a weakness for Keno runners. God, those legs. Anyway, we would all meet in the shallow end of the pool, and we would have an AA meeting every Saturday morning. And then at the end, we would all hold hands. And I'm thinking, I could do this the rest of my life, This is good. And my sponsor sees that. And he had just seen that. That's when we had this conversation. He says, you're going to drink again. I said, why? He says, because you don't know how to stay sober. You just know how to get sober. And I said, what do you want me to do? It's the easiest way to get by him. And he said, we're going to go. And we went to a place called the TIE Club in Las Vegas. Smoke down to here. Ugly chairs with unknown stains. And guys like this, do you want what we have? Like, God, no. So we go in there, and I'm kind of hanging on to him, And these guys are talking, and they're not making any sense. I went. This one guy comes, "How you doing, kid?" I said, "Well, I think my girlfriend's sleeping with the neighbor." "Well, you got one of these books?" Like, what does that have to do with what I just said to you? Hang on, let go. So after the meeting, he goes, "What'd you think?" And I said, "Dick, I did not like that. I want to go back to the swimming pool." And he says, "That's your problem. You know how to get sober, you don't know how to stay sober." He says, "Those guys you're hanging out with, some are going to make it, some of them aren't." He said, "But you need to get the other talent." He says, I said, "Well, what do I do?" He says, "You don't like old timers." And I did not. I didn't like them. And he says, "What I want you to do is adopt an old timer." And so he takes me he says, "Go find an old timer that you think you can do business with. And look in their eyes and see if their eyes match what they're saying. See if it's the package. Because we can't pull anything over in here. We can smell it coming a mile away. If I'm in a meeting and I start to spin a yarn, I can feel the curtains drop. Because we know, and we can spot it. He says, if you find an old timer, he's smiling, he's happy, and his skin matches his eyes, and what he's saying makes sense, adopt him for about a month. Just adopt him and hang out with him." I said, "Okay." So I go to this meeting, and there's this guy named Sanford Chernin, and he was 65, ancient. God, I wish I was 65. But he had a pork pie hat on. He looked like a ska band member, if anybody remembers that. And he would always say, "I can hardly wait to hear what I'm going to say." I thought, that's hilarious. And he gave a pitch, and he said, my goal in AA is to become transparent. And I did not know. It's like he was speaking whale to me. I had no idea what he was talking about. So after the meeting, we sat down on one of these little wooden chairs and table. And I said, "Say, Sanford," I said, "why do you always say, 'I can hardly wait to hear what I'm going to say'?" And he said, "Well, I don't want to be thinking of what I'm going to say while you're talking. I want to be able to listen to you instead of thinking about what I'm going to say. Because I listen in rooms and people are saying stuff, go, 'Oh, yeah, I'm going to pick that. I'm going to say, yeah, I got this.' And then when it's my turn, I want to be able to listen to you and hear you." He says, "So that's what I want to do. So I don't think about what I'm going to say." I go, "Well, that makes sense." And I go, "What about this transparency thing? What do you mean my goal is to be transparent?" He smiled at me. He says, if you like me, it's because you like me. Me. If you like me right now, it's because you like me. It's not because you like something I'm trying to be, so you'll like me. Because that's how I ran my whole life before I got in here. I was always trying to behave like I thought you'd like. Tough guy, smart guy, fisher guy, whatever it is, He says, if you like me, it's because you like me. Whatever impression you have of me is the right impression. So whatever impression you have of me, it's the right impression. And if you like me, then we can have a long-term friendship. I never had those before, because as soon as they figured out what I was really like, then they always collapsed. That's why I had so many marriages. I got 4 divorces. So I thought that was brilliant. I said, "So you're just exactly like you are." I had 14 days at the time. That's the only way I could ask the question. "You're like you actually are." He said, "Yes, this is what I am." I said, "That's a great idea, Sanford." And I got up to, I said, "I'm going to try that." And as I was leaving, he grabs me by the arm and he says, "Hold it, kid." He says, "Transparency is not a good look on you yet." He says, "I'm not trying to be mean." Same thing. He says, "I'm just telling you, you don't have anything. You got nothing. There's nothing in there. You are a collection of things you've been practicing to be. There's nothing there." He says, "So don't try it yet." He says, "You got to get some character. You got to get something going on there." And I said, "Well, how do I do that?" And he says, "Well, why don't you go to meetings?" And they didn't have book study meetings like they do now, where they go line by line and stuff like that. And my sponsor never sat down with me with this book. He told me to go do the steps and then do them and then bring them back. That just wasn't done back then. He says, "Go to book study meetings and step study meetings and find out what these people are doing and do it." Just do it. He says, this is the great thing, is this is a behavior-based recovery. So how you behave is what's going to determine how you do in here. If I do what people that are happy and scratching and giggling around here and long-term sobriety, I got to stand a pretty good chance of getting what they got. He says, so just do what they're doing until it gets comfortable. He says, and then we'll work on the transparency part. So there I am. So I'm in Las Vegas. Now I'm doing the steps. Now I'm going to meetings. I'm actually trying to be of service. I'm staying away from the newcomer girls because some of the newcomer girls' sponsors made it a point to tell me that I should stay away from the newcomer girls. There's nothing more embarrassing than be talking to a girl and have some old woman come over and say, "You stay away from my baby." Yeah, that's impressive. So that's what I did. You know, I came around here like that. And I meet guys that have that in here. Because I know guys, they come in, they don't know what I'm talking about when I talk about this. Because they came in, they were beat, and they did the steps, and they did all the stuff, and they stayed sober. And that's the first step. It's in the book. A lot of stuff in the book. It says in here that, because I love that, we don't have time to go into, there's so much stuff in this book. By the way, I brought 3 books. I brought my book, which was in 1979. I got a first edition here. This is my sister's book. She 12-stepped me into this program. She was a little nuts, so she highlighted everything. And she actually has different colors. I'm not sure what they mean. But this is actually a first edition book, and it was printed in 1948, I believe. And you can't do it much damage. I'll just pass it around. And then I've got a 4th edition, and then I've got my 3rd edition from when I came in here. And if somebody has wants to know the difference between the 3, there's a lot of differences. I'm not going to go into it a bunch. It says here, we learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. This is the first step of recovery. And that's what the way he explained it to me was that if I can come all the way in and sit all the way down. Because there's the thing about surrender. Anybody here ex-military? Anybody in the military? Well, let me tell you about the word surrender. The word surrender does not appear in the first 164 pages. It's not there. It's not in the 12 by 12. And the reason I believe is because Bill was military. So in the military, there's times when you surrender. Patton surrendered once, I think, just to save his tanks. So if I'm surrounded, if you guys are all Nazis, you may be, and you're surrounding me, then I got to surrender to conserve me, because I'm in the fighting unit, right? But that doesn't mean I go to work for you. It means that I surrender. Now you take me to a camp, and I note everything. I'm keeping track of everything. I mess with you as much as possible. I sit down and pretend I'm listening to you, but I sit on the edge of my seat because I'm supposed to escape at the first convenience. That's a military surrender. So that's why sometimes when they say, well, we have to surrender, it doesn't say surrender in here. It said we had to fully concede to our innermost selves we're alcoholics. I like the word tap out. I was such a coward when I was younger, I learned how to fight later. And so I did some fighting, and every now and then you got to tap out before you black out. Tap out before you black out. And this is the first step in recovery. The delusion that we're like other people or presently maybe has to be smashed. So that's the first step. Then the second step. Wow. I think that's a big chunk of the second step. Because the first step says, that we're admitted we're alcoholic. My dad admitted he was an alcoholic and he died drunk. So admitting I'm alcoholic doesn't do it. The second part, there has to be more than that. The second part, and this, by the way, this is all my own opinion. If your sponsor says something different, go with that. I'm just telling you what my experience was. The second part of that first step is that our lives were unmanageable. I didn't think so, because I was making a lot of money when I got in here. It was a long time before I made that much money again. But it didn't matter. I had a car that didn't have a key. It had alligator clips to start it with, and it had no first gear, and it had no clutch. So you had to start it in second gear. So when you get into an intersection, you pull the clips off, and it would shudder to a stop. Then when it turned green, you'd put them together and step on the gas. Right? I'm making $300-400 a day. That's the best. Good Lord, my life's unmanageable. Yeah, it was unmanageable. It was obviously unmanageable. And the second step is in the book again. Oddly enough, it's in We Agnostics. And in We Agnostics, which is my favorite one, because I thought that when I came in here, I thought I was smart. And I do have a gifted IQ, which is not an asset around here. I thought it would be. I thought I'm smart. This will help, and it does not. If, when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, or when drinking, you have little control over the amount you take, you're probably an alcoholic. And if that be the case, you're suffering from an illness only a spiritual experience will conquer. So I'm too smart for religion, and I'm thinking I'm different from everybody else in here. You're buying all that God stuff. I ain't going for it. I was kind of proud of that fact. And then I was at a book meeting, and they talked about this. This is me. To be doomed to an alcoholic death, like my dad. There wasn't enough people to carry a casket with my dad. If my dad hadn't been ex-military, I would have had to hire somebody to carry the casket. That's an alcoholic death. There's a lot of alcoholic deaths. A lot of times they don't get called alcoholic deaths. Getting shot while you're climbing out of somebody's window. It's probably an alcoholic death. I had somebody who tried to stab me once. I don't know who it was. I'm sure I did something to him. I don't think it was a door-to-door stabber. That would have been an alcoholic death. My dad, they called it congestive heart failure. That gets caught a lot. To be doomed to an alcoholic death or to live on a spiritual basis are not always easy alternatives to face. So, that was me. Like I was just intellectually arrogant. I'm not going for it. I'm going to call it a higher power, a doorknob, ultimate being, something, anything, but God. I'm not going to go for God then. And my sponsor said, that doesn't matter. You don't have to. He said, but think about what you're doing. Let's just say we took this. Now, we used to say this. You would take a clipboard down to the mall. Well, malls are dead now. So you'd have to do it online. But if you did an online survey and a chance to win something for free, and everybody clicked it, and they had two choices. A, die an alcoholic death. B, live on a spiritual basis. Everybody on earth would pick B, except the alcoholic. And the alcoholic would stop and go, what kind of alcoholic death? I mean, what are we talking here? What kind of spiritual life? I mean, what do I got to do? Do I got to do Habitat for Humanity and stuff like that? And then the killer for me was down at the bottom. Perhaps this isn't so difficult. About half our original membership were of exactly that type. So when this book was written in '39 in the Northeast, actually communism had a pretty good foothold, because they felt that religion was the panacea of the masses, and if you were an intellectual and went to college, that's kind of what you were taught. So in the Northeast, about half of our original membership were of exactly that type. So I thought I was smart and cool and a little smarter than anybody else, and actually I was average, because if half of our membership was exactly like me, I'm average. Yeah. We must find a spiritual basis for life or else. Bill's hilarious. If a mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life were sufficient to overcome alcoholism, many of us would have recovered long ago. And I was a list maker, and I made lists of what I was going to do after I learned the 6 languages. And Didn't work. Our human resources, as marshaled by the will, were not sufficient. They failed utterly. Utterly. Lack of power, that was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves. Exactly how and why are we to find this power? That's exactly what this book is about. And it says here, its main object is to enable you, me, to find a power greater than myself that'll solve my problem. Because if I could have solved my own problems, I would have. I wouldn't be here today. Super Bowl tomorrow. I'd be home and ready. And it's funny that it talks about the agnostic, but the whole time it's talking about the agnostic, it's really talking about the believer. I sponsored two guys. This is not as popular anymore, but I sponsored two guys that were Satanists. Any Satanists? They studied Anton Zandor's Bible and all that. They were Satanists. So they believed that Satan was a power, and then that's who they linked up with. So we get to this part, and they go, well, I can't do this stuff because I'm a Satanist. I go, well, where'd he come from? Think that through. It was a fallen angel, I think. So it doesn't matter. That's a power greater than themselves. So it doesn't matter, that power greater than themselves. And so for me, that's how I got past that. And there was a girl named June G, who was a sweetheart, just a sweetheart. I've only got 6 more minutes here and we're going to break up. She got sober when she was 13. And she was so bad, her sponsor said, don't tell anybody I sponsor you. She used to put her cigarettes out with her feet to show you how tough she was. She was a street urchin in San Diego. And she came in and she was wild and crazy, and she would lay on the floor. and she got stayed sober. So when I met her, she had 8 years sober. She was in law school. And she was telling that story, and I'm trying to make sense of it from that to what she was now. And it's hard to do. And she said, I would rather live my life as if there is a God and find out at the end of my life that there isn't, than live my life as if there isn't a God and then find out at the end of my life that there is one. And that just made perfect sense. I'm a dice dealer. I'm thinking, what's the harm? I'm just laying the bet. I'm taking the odds. What's the worst that could happen for me if I just lived my life as if there was a God? If I quit fighting it, I went to Est, Ekankar, Nichiren Shihoshu, name it, I went there to find an alternative. But what if I just lived my life as if there was a God? What would be the worst thing that could happen? So that's what I did. I started living my life as if there was a God. And that's what I do today. If you put a gun to my head, I couldn't tell you if there's a God or not. But I can tell you that living my life as if there is a God, my life just hums along pretty damn well. And I actually believe that if we go to heaven, let's say there's 2 seats left, and it's actually the old kind of heaven from like Bible school, with the gate and everything, and the person with the desk, name, and there's only 1 seat. And it's me and some guy who swears there's a God, but he ain't acting like it. I think I'm getting in. I'm acting as if there is a God. And that's what I said earlier about this being just a behavior-based recovery. If I'll behave as if there is a God, my life is great. I don't have to believe there's a God first and then have it work. And everything that I've read in the big book, everything that's been taught to me in AA is a result of that. If I'll find somebody who's having a good time in AA and I'll just try some of the stuff they're doing, just try it. And if it fits, great, I'll keep it. If it doesn't, I'll get rid of it. So I'll just behave that way. It doesn't matter what I'm thinking. Doesn't matter. Third step, we could spend all day on that. We're not going to. But I'd be happy to talk to you about it anytime you want. This whole thing about the third step talks about something called, goes to the ABCs. We're alcoholic, can't manage our own lives. No human power can repair us. And God couldn't, would if he were sought. We are now at step 3, which is that we decided to turn our will and our life over to God as we understood him. Well, I was okay with that. I didn't understand God, but here you go. It's yours. It's just a behavior. First requirement, be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. My sponsor said, how long have you been out of high school? That's 31. It took me a long time to get out of high school, so it's only been 15 years. He said, how much money you got? 15 years out of high school. How much money do you have? And the truth was, I was below zero. I didn't have any money. If you piled up all my assets and sold them, you couldn't cover my debt. So that's me running my own life. Nobody talks to me. Nobody will take my calls. I don't have any money. He says, so what's the worst that could happen if you just let God run it for a while? We're almost always in collusion with somebody or something, even though our motives are good. And I said, yeah, but I got good motives. He says, yeah, those suck. He says, he was a boxer. This guy, this is my second sponsor. His name was, he fought Ezra Charles. This is Dave Hamsey, and he fought Ezra Charles when Ezra Charles was the heavyweight champion of the world. And he was still standing at the end of the fight. So I used to have really short arguments with Dave Hamsey. I used to argue with him on the phone. So we're sitting on the back deck and we're talking about motives. And he says, yeah, you're the guy that says, oh, honey, I'm so sorry. I never meant to do that. I'm so sorry. You know I love you. I'm so sorry. That was me. He says, those motives suck. He said, it doesn't matter what your motives are. Nobody cares what your motives are. And I started to argue with him, and he says, okay. He says, and we were like right across each other. He says, let's just say, for instance, I didn't mean to, but I just reached over and knocked you out. He said, would that be good or bad? And I said, that would be bad, Dave. I backed up a little bit. And he said, what if I wanted to, really wanted to, and I didn't? Would that be better? And I wanted to get on this esoteric thing. Whoa, you know, your motives are... I said, no, that would be better. He said, so you don't really care what my motives are, do you? You don't care. He says, if you get up and you do something good for somebody, especially a stranger, they don't know what my motives are. If I get up and act gratitude, because gratitude is an action, if I do something grateful, if I do something loving, then that's who I am. And it doesn't matter if I believe it. It doesn't matter what my motives are. So all of a sudden, that whole thing about check my motives, he says, don't listen to that. He says, look at your actions, because that's who you are. He says, if your head hits the pillow tonight and you haven't had a drink, you win. And if you've done something good for someone, for no reason, you win. If you want to be a good person, do something good. I thought, God, it makes it so simple. He says, that's because you're so smart, you think about everything till you burn it into the ground. And then the rest gets on and gets worse after that. But I'll talk about, real quick, I'll talk about principles. I got 1 minute to talk about principles. We have in the 70s sometime, it actually started with Joe and Charlie. I love Joe and Charlie. I got to meet them, got to talk with them. I got books signed by them and everything. Joe and Charlie were great going through the book. If you get a chance, it's really a neat way to kind of go through the beginning of the book. But there was a guy that was touring with them, and his sponsor said, tell me what the principles are, because it said to practice these principles in all our affairs. It says, no one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. And he said, what are the principles? And he set out to find out what the principles were. And what he did was he wrote down virtues. He found virtues that he thought matched the steps. I don't want to be controversial here, but he wrote down hope, faith, courage, security, fellowship, blah, blah, blah. And he says those aren't the principles. He says those are virtues that you get by doing the principles. Because it says in here, it says, the principles we have set down are guys, the principles we have set down. And none of those words are in here. Hope, faith, courage, wink and blink and nod, Manny, Mo, Jack. They're not in here. He says that's not the principle. So, they're not. So I argued with him on the phone about it. And he sent me to the 12 by 12 of all things. I always tried to avoid the 12 by 12. It's too specific sometimes. This is the forward of the 12 by 12. And in it says, this book deals with the 12 steps, the 12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous. It presents an explicit view of the principles by which AA members recover and by which their society functions. AA's 12 steps are a group of principles. AA's 12 steps are a group of principles. So when they're talking about the principles of AA, they're talking about the steps. The steps are the principles. The other thing, that list that guy wrote up, are the virtues that we get by practicing the principles. If your sponsor thinks something differently, go with him. But this is the way I did it. And so I started to think about the principles. And once again, it's not honesty, it's not faith, it's not courage, it's the action, the activity that gives me those virtues that count. Because I can do the action. I can do that. I can show up and make some coffee. I can't make that Cuban coffee. But I'm going to find out before I leave. AA's 12 steps are a group of principles, spiritual in their nature, which if practiced as a way of life, can expel the obsession to drink. Wow. And to enable the sufferer to become happily and usefully whole. That's pretty strong. It's pretty strong. The other thing about the principles, the ones that the list of stuff, is that, I've seen them in clubs, and if I don't sponsor them, they don't sponsor me. It's none of my business how they do it. And but I do know that if you left the first and last ones on there and mixed the rest of them up, nobody would notice for quite a while. You can't do that with the steps. So I'm 3 minutes late. What I want to do now is we're just going to kind of open it up a little bit till we get to the half hour, and we can just, anybody wants to talk, just if you have any questions, something you want to say about what we just said, and then when we finish up at the half hour, we're going to do the third step prayer, and that will be a legitimate third step. That's how that works. So, so